Genesis of the method. Origins. Dr. LEFEBURE is at the origin of several major scientific discoveries that are of capital importance to mankind. He is, in fact, the first person to have resolved one of the greatest enigmas of science. How did man evolve from savage to human? How did religions develop? The phosphine, first of the phenes, is linked to the evolution of mankind. The first man focused on fire for countless millennia. In the very beginning, they had to wait for lightning to strike a tree and set it on fire before they could use it. As they did not know how to make a fire, they had to keep it burning. Even when moving from one place to another, one of the members of the clan had the heavy burden of taking care of the sacred fire. This focus on the fire spread out over countless times. Light at the dawn of humanity. The first men had noticed a surprising effect of fire that completely transformed man living in a savage state and the life of the group. The activities of the first societies were organized around the fire, and even the hierarchy was determined by it. The keepers of the fire had such an important role in the group that they would be sentenced to death if they let the fire go out. At the same time, they were respected because they possessed knowledge that extended far beyond the understanding of the rest of the tribe. That is how shamanism was born, and it became the first religion. Jean-Jacques Hano's beautiful film, Quest for Fire, depicts very well how things probably happened. The first men, pre-hominid, are shown taming the fire, collecting it, and literally nurturing it. Sadly, during a trip, the fire goes out. The clan then goes on a quest for fire. Fire was used to protect the tribe from wild animals and from the cold, particularly at night. Without fire, the survival of the clan was rather uncertain. They thus had to go in search of a tree that had been set on fire by lightning. Watching over the fire meant focusing on it continuously. It has been proved that battery farm chickens, raised under artificial light all day in order to accelerate the laying of eggs, have a greater number of neurological connections than chickens that have been raised free-range. This is scientific proof of the influence of light on nerve connections. Fire and phosphines are at the origin of the development of the upper brain. More neurological connections means greater intellectual abilities. It is light, and focusing on it, which really means doing phosphines, that permitted the development of the brain, and the upper brain in particular. Unlike chickens that possess only a limited form of communication compared to other animal species, the first men already showed capacities for adaptation and an extraordinary imagination. The frescoes found in prehistoric caves are a testimony of that intelligence. Without imagination, there is no artistic creation. However archaic the first forms of human thinking, they were amplified in a considerable way by a natural stimulation of the brain, phosphines. To be convinced of that, one only needs to practice simple exercises with phosphines, amplifiers of thoughts. See the ABC of phosphenic mixing e-box set. The phenomenon of amplification of thoughts can be observed in drawing made by nursery school children. At the start of the experiment, their drawings are very small when compared to the size of the sheet of paper, and the colors are just hinted at with simple strokes of dark colors organized randomly. After observing several consecutive phosphines, the drawings improve. The children cover the sheet with bigger and bigger drawings, and the weak colors seen at the beginning become more harmonious and joyful and fill up the whole picture. There is a direct influence of the phosphine on mental abilities and thus on creativity. The practice of exercises using phosphines also improves memorization. Dr. LEFEBURE's method of phosphenic mixing applied to education is based on that discovery. This method is practiced today by many people, mainly students or high school students who wish to optimize their concentration and increase their capacity for memorization, two essential keys to successful studying. The practice of phosphenic mixing, which is the emission of a thought during the presence of the phosphine, produces an amplification of the neurological connections in the zones of the brain related to memory, intelligence, and the spirit of initiative. Memory and initiative are indeed two factors that play a major role in social success. Yet, observing a phosphine reveals a much deeper dimension. Actually, the phosphine is composed of rhythms and movements. Phosphines can be animated by movements of swaying, pulsation, rotation, or even whirling for certain persons. Phosphines are the expression of our cerebral rhythms. Their observation is the observation of our own cerebral rhythms, but at a much lower octave. Now, fixing one's attention on something animated makes one want to move as well. And as focusing attention on something animated creates movement in the mind of the spectator, cerebral rhythms thus transmit rhythms to the phosphines, and the phosphines contribute to the amplification of those same cerebral rhythms. First of all, that process will trigger rhythmic movements of the body. These rhythmic movements of the body gave birth to dancing, sacred dances first, then folk dances. The second phase of evolution, phosphines and rhythmic movements of the body. For millennia, sways have been practiced by many traditions, as well as by religions or initiatory groups, in order to provoke psychic experiences. It is easy to see the importance and usefulness of swaying for human beings. All children like to sway, and all mothers spontaneously rock their children. For what other reason than physiological necessity underlining a rhythmic function of the brain? Too often, parents stop their children from swaying because they do not understand the importance of sways. Children have an instinctive feeling for that and are able to relate to their deepest rhythms. However, that is not the case for adults who have lost touch with that universal spiritual path and who must make great efforts to find it once again. Autistic children that are away from the external world and spend a great amount of time at internalizing, feel these cerebral rhythms and let themselves bear by it. Unfortunately, because of some deficiencies, they cannot profit from all the benefits like yogis and religions practitioners. In order for that practice to be efficient for adults, one primary condition in addition to the phosphine is necessary. Thoughts have to be rhythmic. They then acquire tremendous energy. Let's take an example. Even blowing very hard, the wind will not pass through a wall. However, when the molecules of air are blown through a whistle, sound will pass through the walls and propagates to very far distances. That amplification of cerebral rhythms has an influence on the rhythms of thoughts. Hence, the practice of rhythmic thinking that can be found in prayers, litanies, liturgies, hymns, psalms, mantras, etc. A rhythmic thought is much more efficient than a non-rhythmic one. Thoughts, organized by rhythm, stimulate the zones of the brain related to religious thinking and the extension of consciousness. Until not so long ago, rhythms were part of our educational system. They could even be found in schools because rhythms, like phosphenic mixing, mingling the thought with the phosphine, permit a better memorization of information. Learning multiplication tables by singing in rhythm, 2 times 2, 4, 2 times 3, 6, enabled an entire generation to memorize the tables much easier. If an older person is asked how much is 7 times 9, he or she will not hesitate and answer 63, while a child that has learned the multiplication tables in a linear way will find it difficult to answer straight away. Today, learning with rhythms has been removed from the school method to be replaced by analytic thinking. Only television advertisement agencies still know how to exploit rhythms. Hence, the fact that a child who has watched an advertisement only once can recite the slogan several hours later. Nevertheless, certain cultures or religious communities still learn with rhythms, and that is what makes them intellectually superior. That's what allows them these days to have better positions in our society, and also what Charles Darwin called the inheritance of acquired characteristics. I'll elaborate about that in another video or in Phosphenic Energy Universe magazine. The phosphine is an essential scientific key that enables us to understand the cycles of our own evolution. Thus, thanks to the works of Dr. LEFEBURE, we now have the missing link that scientists need in order to understand how prehominids became the human species with all the modifications or even neurological mutation that stemmed from this change. Phosphenism is the basis of every religion and initiatory knowledge and the connection between them. Thanks to the works of Dr. LEFEBURE, we can understand that the worshipping of fire, the moon, the sun, or even the stars is not to be taken symbolically, but simply for what it is, thinking while gazing at a source of light. Phosphines, and their other names, have been used universally and everywhere, hence the importance of fire worship in solar, lunar, or stellar worship. They lay at the foundation of all great civilizations that practiced solar worship: Mayan, Egyptian, Aryan, Zoroastrian, Celtic, Roman, Greek, Chinese, Japanese, Polynesian. In Shintoism, among others, solar worship is still practiced. And let us remember that shamanism is the foundation of all religions, and that it is based on the power of fire. Going back to our sources, haven't we always been taught and repeated, man became man when he domesticated fire? That may be why historical figures such as Akhenaten, Amenhotep IV, 14th century before Christ, and the Emperor Julian, Anno Domini 331 to 363, tried to impose solar worship instead of the distorted religions, whose original meaning had been hidden by priests hungry for power. Akhenaten realized the deep implications of the religion of the city of Heliopolis, the city of the sun, which primary form of worship consisted in focusing on the sun while praying. The technique is explained in the book Phosphenic Mixing Applied to Education. Emperor Julian was an initiate of the mysteries. That emperor was the creator of the phrase Soli Invicto, to the unvanquished sun. In the Eleusinian Mysteries initiation ceremonies, from where stood out all the great men of ancient Greece, Pythagoras, Plato, Aristotle, etc., whether they were philosophers, mathematicians, or poets, the candidate was asked to focus on a torch, to do a phosphene, put on a blindfold, and think of an ear of wheat, the principle of phosphenic mixing. Formerly, in the Catholic service, a candle used to be lighted to be focused on while praying. Still, we can find in some very old chapel in mountain pastures a small board above the candles indicating "Pray while focusing on the candle." It is this specific focus that made André Froissart write his book God Exists. I Have Met Him. Explanations of what led him to his spiritual experience is detailed in Dr. LEFEBURE's book, A Scientific Key to Supernatural Phenomena. In the Orthodox worship, the priest sways while praying and focusing on the flame. Check the article Light, a Key to Knowledge in the Phosphenic Energy Universe magazine. We could quote many other examples, but we will just remind you that praying, rhythmic thinking, while focusing on a source of light, is the foundation of all religions. With this very brief historical reminder, we want to make you become aware of a reality that remains hidden simply because we try to understand it through symbolism and interpretations that have nothing to do with cerebral physiology. Once that is understood, it is easier for us to explain the principles of Phosphenism. An ancient technique. All that is necessary to produce a phosphine is to focus on a source of light, for example a fire for the Zoroastrians, a flame or the stars for the Tibetans, the sun or the moon in solar or lunar worship, the reflections of the sun on the water contained in a gourd for the African mystic. Today, pygmy sorcerers still focus on the flames of a fire to produce visions of the location where the hunters will find game. On several occasions, ethnologists who were sitting near the sorcerer experienced the same vision at the same moment. Nostradamus focused on the reflection of the moon on a silver mirror when he wanted to produce phenomena of clairvoyance and transmit them to Catherine of Medici. All that was made possible by the fact that phosphines are easy to transmit by telepathy. His famous mirror was magical only when the flame of a candle was reflected upon it, permitting the creation of a phosphine. In the same way, fortune-tellers place a candle in front of their crystal ball in order to create a phosphine by reflection, and it is always in the phosphine that they obtain their visions. A few surprising properties of phosphines. Phosphines are thought amplifiers. They are very easy to transmit by telepathy. Under certain conditions, they give more information than an electroencephalogram. Phosphines can be photographed and allowed to see objects passing through in full darkness and even blindfolded. Check Exploring the Brain through the study of oscillation of double phosphines. The feeling of obviousness. The scientists and historians of today have yet to solve the greatest mystery of all times. How come the phosphine, as an essential part of mankind, has not been described more often, while human beings have always exteriorized their view of the world by creating frescoes, drawings, paintings, songs, stories, etc. It is absolutely incredible that thousands or even millions of individuals all over the world have experienced the phenomenon of phosphines without leaving any trace of it. What prevents us from seeing the obvious? Dr. LEFEBURE answers this question precisely in The Pneumophene, the breathing technique that opens the doors to the world beyond. The research about phosphines is hindered and hidden by what the doctor called the feeling of obviousness. When we induce phosphines, it appears so obvious that we forget to ask ourselves the fundamental questions. It is because of this feeling of obviousness that Dr. LEFEBURE developed in the Pneumophene that the phosphines, though used since the dawn of humanity and being a major contribution to the genesis of human civilization, were so little studied. Only few enlightened ones transmitted this secret to selected others after forbidding them to reveal it, so to give a hint of how the powers it enables to access are substantial. Indeed, the simpler a secret is, the more one would attempt to hide it, knowing that a simple concept is easy to understand and to use. On the contrary, one is less tempted to hide the intricate. But another question remains for scientists. What level of development could be attained by the human brain after 5 or 10 generations of practice of phosphenic mixing? More information can be found in Phosphenic Energy Universe, a magazine that you can download for free on this site. Phosphenic discovery. This theory that I've just expounded does not challenge today's accepted theories of evolution, but actually unveils a new direction of research that has been unknown to scientists before our publications. This file has been sent to various scientific and medical institutions in France, and since that day still no criticism has been opposed. Dr. LEFEBURE is a forerunner. In 1960, he had already informed the French educational, medical, scientific, industrial, religious, and political authorities of his numerous discoveries and their diverse applications. Today, all his research concerning the applications of cerebral rhythms, and in particular cerebral alternation and the rhythmic functions of the brain, forms a solid reference for all researchers. As a conclusion for this chapter, when the scientist would at last put forth the necessary effort to discover and then disclose the work of Dr. LEFEBURE, there is no doubt that humanity will step in a new era built on a closer relationship between man and creation, or God. The first men have seen phosphines since immemorial times. Phosphenic mixing is memory and intelligence enhancement consecutive to a higher amount of possibilities in association of ideas, which flows through creativity thanks to the combination of thoughts with phosphines.